This week, prosecutors dropped charges against former Governor Bob McDonnell, but is his political career dead? We also rebut the right's attack on labor unions and fill you in on this week's news on the ForVirginia podcast. Let's get started. Thanks and welcome to the ForVirginia podcast for the week ending September 9th, 2016. This is show number 6. 6 weeks we've been doing this now. Summer's almost over, people. I hope you enjoyed this, what could very well be the last week of summer, or not. We'll see. I'm your host, Michael Brandon Wade. Thanks for tuning in. ForVirginia is a Virginia State Political Action Committee focused on supporting progressive causes and candidates at the local and state level. Our weekly podcast is meant to provide you with news and analysis of politics across the state, helping you get the information you need to be an informed citizen, battle right-wing propaganda, and to help get the progressive left organized and activated where we are most needed. We're going to show you how the sausage is made. It's our job to get in the kitchen and start getting things done. As always, we'd like to ask that you go to our website at forvirginia.org. We'll be posting show notes with links to all of the sources that we reference in the show. We'd also like to hear any feedback that you have and ways we can be better. I'd like to start off with an apology regarding last week's show. We mentioned Kevin Starlings, who's a city council candidate in Richmond. Mr. Starlings is a felon who had his ability to run for office restored as part of Terry McAuliffe's blanket restorations. And we kind of made light of his embezzlement charge, and one of our listeners pointed out, Joseph, thank you very much for pointing this out. It's kind of hypocritical of me to be talking about voting restoration. On the other hand, was perpetrating the same kind of prejudice against Mr. Starlings. So want to just get that out there and out of the way. We are also looking for content producers, people who would like us to publish our news and opinion articles about issues affecting your area of the Commonwealth. If you're a Drupal admin, we could also use help building out a website. Please leave a comment on one of our podcasts on YouTube. Email info@forvirginia.org or contact us on Facebook if you're interested in helping with that. We'd also like to encourage you to share this podcast on social media as much as you can. Like us on Facebook. Share the links to the show or notes. Help us get the word out. And if you like what we're doing and would like to help us support us and keep this going week after week, please head over to our ActBLUE page and make a donation to help us and support us. We have some wonderful pins with the Birdie-Crat logo, Progressive Revolution, ForVirginia.org logo pins, $5. We'll mail them out to you. We appreciate everyone's support, helping us keep this thing running. Moving on, we'll start with the updates from last week. Our main story last week was about the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. A lot of outrage about that, rightfully so. One additional case that came to our attention that seemed to have escaped everybody's radar, in addition to Jamichael Mitchell, we told you last week of Henry Stewart, who died at the jail in August. There was also another unnamed female. Her identity was being withheld because of HIPAA regulations, apparently. But this week we learned from the Huffington Post, who did a jail deaths investigation following Sandra Bland's death in Texas jail in 2015. This man, Mark Goodrum, they finally got the Freedom of Information Act request back from the jail. Mr. Goodrum, a 60-year-old man, faced misdemeanor charges for smoking marijuana in his own home, was rushed from the Hampton Roads Regional Jail to a nearby medical center where he passed away. Goodrum had severe medical issues. We do not know if the jail is at fault in this case, but Mr. Goodrum spent a month at the jail and was only there because he could not afford a $100 bail for smoking pot in his home. 1 month in jail because you can't afford a $100 bail. It's just insane. We told you last week, city council members, sheriffs, even the mayor of Hampton, current mayor of Hampton, were board of directors at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. I do see that they have the board members page back up. So you can go there and see names like Robert Ike, Chris Sneed, Donnie Tuck, so forth. Those are the people we can hold accountable for that. Show up at your city council meetings. Speak up. They have public comment periods. You can get your 2 minutes and go up there and tell them what you think. Petersburg City Council passed a package of tax increases and budget cuts in order to shore up the hole in their budget that we told you about previously. They did not close their fire station, to the applause of proponents of the fire department. Not sure if that's actually going to fill the goal, but there are several measures that they put in place, including a cigarette tax, restaurant meal increase, hotel rooms, property tax was increased, 50 cents per $100. See how that goes. Fire chief is actually retiring. So that's the news from Petersburg. We also told you about Virginia Beach School Board member Carolyn Weems, who was outed by the Virginian pilot for conflict of interest through her printing company, Simply Sales, which received more than $56,000 from the city schools since 2009. The state law allows individual contracts with schools up to $500, which they apparently weaseled their way around by delivering $1,000 worth of supplies to the school on one day, but basically split the order in two and charged the additional invoice 4 days later. So they basically, the state law says you can do $500 worth of business with the school board, so they did $499.50 apparently on several occasions, and then split the rest of the difference 4 days later. Can't make it up, people. Anyways, so Miss Weems is now apparently working with her colleague to rectify the conflict of interest law and to kind of clarify some of the changes there. She's since ceased business with the school, but come on, please. Moving on to news for this week. Prosecutors announced Tuesday they will not pursue a second trial against former Governor Bob McDonnell or his wife on corruption charges. This follows the Supreme Court overturning his conviction about 2 months ago. So McDonnell is apparently a free man, but at what cost to his political career? Now, some of the analysis I heard earlier this week basically has stated that McDonnell's career is effectively over. I think there seemed to be some perception during the trial itself that he basically threw his wife under the bus in some kind of attempt to save his ass, or save his political career at least. But I don't know. We've seen comebacks in the political arena. I was going to give you an update on Joe Morrissey in Richmond. He didn't catch all of last week. I mean, this is a guy who is currently leading the mayor's race in Richmond while he's simultaneously being disbarred for lying about having sex with a 17-year-old secretary in his law office, who he's now married to. At the time, she was underage and so forth. I was going to provide an update on that, but there hasn't been any real news on that this week. But back to McDonnell, I mean, some people think this guy was a rising star. He could have been a presidential contender if he hadn't been, prosecuted. Charges of corruption, accepting gifts, loans, violating federal bribery laws, the conviction, the Supreme Court overturning it. He missed the boat this time around. That is for sure. Just imagine what if we did have McDonnell as a Republican nominee, if none of that had happened right now. What an alternate reality. McDonnell testified in detail about his broken marriage, saying he was unable to persuade his wife to undergo counseling after their relationship deteriorated. A trial produced an enormous volume of evidence, a portrait of a man whose personal life unfolded in stark contrast to his public persona. This according to McClatchydc.com. So yeah, he's free. But not only is his political career over, Virginia's still wiping up after him. Richmond Times-Dispatch editorial talks about the harsh abortion regulations that were imposed by the McDonnell administration. The regulations, which impose hospital-like standards by dictating hallway width, ventilation standards, etc., supposedly necessary for patient safety, these are the same type of regulations that Texas attempted to use to shut down abortion clinics throughout the state. Women's health issues, as they say, air quotes, of course. The Texas laws were struck down by the Supreme Court as being an unnecessary burden in violation of Roe v. Wade. I think one of the main arguments against that was that, proctology exams, or colonoscopies rather, have a higher rate of complication and serious injury or side effect than most abortions do. And yet all of the focus on the health of the mother instead of colonoscopy patients kind of proved to the court that these regulations were not an attempt to provide women's health, they were to restrict abortion. And so Virginia, Bob McDonnell's administration put in similar measures throughout the state, and the Virginia Board of Health is trying to roll back these regulations, required abortion providers to have contractual connections to nearby hospitals, or admitting privileges as they're called. So we're still dealing with that. So Bob McDonnell's political career is over. I say good riddance. See you later, Bob. And it's time for our Shame of the Week, where we like to bring attention to bad behavior by Virginia's politicians, or in this case, one of Virginia's company, the corporation that liberals love to hate. Of course, I'm talking about Dominion Power. Monday was Labor Day, but that didn't stop Dominion's natural gas subsidiaries from locking out over 900 union employees in 6 states over a vote on a 4-year contract. Dominion Hope and Dominion Transmission in Ohio, Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia were locked out of their facilities following a contract negotiation. Companies will use supervisors and other non-union contractors and temporary workers during the lockout. Union members rejected the pact in part over proposals that would have left new hires without medical insurance on retirement, and that would have replaced pensions with a cash savings plan. Dominion Hope Vice President Jeff Murphy, said in a joint statement with Dominion Transmission Vice President Brian Shepard that the uncertainty of the labor situation could have left customers out in the cold, so they had to bring in non-union workers. More than half of the 915 affected workers are in West Virginia. Just amazing, folks, just amazing. So, one of the things I do as a service for you, dear listener, is listen to right-wing radio, Hannity, Beck, Limbaugh, those guys. I don't want to be one of these people that gets stuck in a bubble or an echo chamber and only consumes media, news articles, etc. that already fit my worldview and back my existing prejudices. So I listen to these things when I'm driving around, which varies from week to week, because I want to know what they're thinking, and I want to know what the arguments are that they're making, because the other people that I might talk to that aren't already in my left-wing echo chamber are going to be saying these same things, talking points of the right, as you will. So I don't want the first time that I hear about one of these things to be out of the mouth of somebody that I might be having a late night drinking debate with, so to speak. So I listen to Rush, and I listen to Hannity, and I listen to Glenn Beck and all these guys, because I want to know what their argument are and what they're thinking. I want to know how they think, because I want to know how to defeat them. I mean, literally, and part of the reason why we're doing this is to kind of get some of that information out to you, so that you have the rhetorical arguments ready to fight these people, whether it's on a bar stool, or in a city council meeting, or hopefully at some point in time, in your run for school board or House of Delegates. I mean, we want people to get active in politics, and we have to be able to debate these people and be prepared for the type of arguments that they're going to come up with. So I listen to these guys because I want to be prepared. And Beck did a series on the history of labor unions this past week, I guess in homage to Labor Day. And so here's some of the things that they were talking about. So first off, they couched the argument in unions have served a purpose in America. Improving wages, job security, working conditions. We no longer work a 16-hour day. We no longer work 60 hours a week. We don't have child labor. We have health insurance. We have overtime pay. We have OSHA. We have health and safety standards because of unions. And I guess to them, though, that the time they've outlived their usefulness now because they've become corrupt and they're useless now. I think, some of the arguments that I heard was that unions were originally racist shops because blacks weren't allowed to join. And so if you bought a union cigar, you would know that it was made by white people or that it was the mafia and the Teamsters. I think one of the things that they really are couching on right now is this whole radical leftist anarchist, the violence. And to be fair, May Day, which is Labor Day for the rest of the world, there is a lot of protest and violence associated with that. And the other thing that they like to say is that today's unions are too fat and too bureaucratic. If you're a lazy, no good worker who doesn't do their job, there's no safer place for you than in a union because they will not be able to fire you. And to be honest, they actually have a pretty good point about this because anecdotally speaking, I've heard many a situation where the manager or the supervisor couldn't fire Bob even though he had been sleeping on the job, or Jill doesn't do her job, goes in her office and shuts her door for 8 hours a day and doesn't do any work, but they can't fire her because they've got union protection. Again, the outlier rather than the rule, but they really love to demonize labor unions. But on the other hand, I can tell you just as many instances where the union stepped in to prevent a manager from overstepping their bounds, whether it was, an abusive situation or being petty about something or trying to break the rules, basically, management breaking the rules. So it goes both ways. And one of the ways that they have tried to destroy labor successfully, I might add, over the past decades is through so-called right-to-work laws. Now, what right-to-work means, and I'll tell you what the situation is in a non-right-to-work state from one of my family members who told me that when they were younger, as a teenager, they worked part-time in a junkyard, and it was a union junkyard, and so in order to get a part-time job there 3 days a week, working 20, 25 hours, they had to pay the same union dues, the same amount of union dues as a part-time worker that the full-time long-term employees had to pay. Whereas in a right-to-work state like Virginia has been, you don't have to do that. So you can work in a place that has a union for their employees, but you don't have to pay the unions. Now, even though you're not a member of the union, you still get union protection, meaning that if you have a grievance with management, if the union lawyers or representatives aren't busy, they still have to support you in your grievance. People still get the benefits of collective bargaining that unions perform. For example, one of my family members who was not a member of a union working for a federal agency was still the recipient of tens of thousands of dollars in back pay that the union had won in a lawsuit due to overtime and overseas travel. So we're still getting the benefits of unions even while unions are dying. Their membership is imploding. So another example that might be a little more pertinent is the Fight for 15. So we talked about it, this big convention that was in Richmond 4 or 5 weeks ago. The Service Employees International Union, the SEIU, is basically one of the top organizations, or one of the largest organizations behind the Fight for 15. They represent about 2 million workers across the United States. How many fast food workers do we have in the country? I just looked it up. It's about 3.5 million. It was 3.6 a few years ago. It's 3.5 million fast food workers in the country right now. How many service workers do we have? 120 million jobs, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 160 million. The SEIU represents 2 million of those. And this union, which is dying because they can't get membership, is out fighting for 15. And conservatives, Republican, GOP in Virginia and throughout the country are trying to kill unions with these right-to-work laws. Virginia's had theirs for 70 years. There will be a ballot amendment number 1 in November, which will try to enshrine Virginia's right-to-work law in the state constitution. And what it should be called, I've said this before, right to work for less. Robert Reich, Clinton's old Secretary of Labor, he's on Facebook. He's got a great book called Saving Capitalism. If you haven't read it, get it. Robert Reich has some great videos on what happens in right-to-work states versus non-right-to-work states, what worker pay looks like, what pensions look like, all of this stuff. He does a really good job, better than I could ever explain it. I'll link it in the show notes. You should check it out. But we need to make sure that we have all of our people going out in November to vote no on Amendment 1 for the right to work for less amendment. But going back to Dominion, their subsidiaries in this lockout that they've done, I keep a binder of notes that I collect in order to do my show prep. I got a lot of stuff on Dominion. We're probably going to have a whole show on them in the next week or two. I mean, I know everybody across the board is just really had it with them. I mean, if there's one company in the state that kind of epitomizes everything that Bernie Sanders was saying about crony capitalism and the way that corrupt government runs, I think Dominion's probably our boogeyman, if you will. But one of the things that I've always wanted to do is to decrease my reliance on Dominion. For those of you in the western part of the state, those of you that aren't familiar with the James River transmission lines, this all ties into solar and their fight against solar and their net metering policies, which prevent solar investment in the state. I've wanted to put solar in my house. I don't want to get a loan for 20, 30 years to afford it. I can't get one of these companies like Solar City or SunPower to come in and put it on my roof for me because of Dominion. And that's starting to change a little bit. There's a company called Arcadia Power who has what are called renewable energy credits, or RECs. And basically what they do is that you sign your power bill over to Arcadia or one of the other companies like them, and they will basically take your kilowatts and purchase renewable energy credits from a wind farm in Wisconsin or Nebraska or wherever they have their places at. And so basically what you're doing is you're still getting your power from Dominion, but you're paying your money to Arcadia or one of these other companies like them. And so that money is actually going to support solar power elsewhere in the country. And one of the main problems with these kind of offset programs is that they charge a premium on top of your bill. So I think to have 100% renewable energy credits for wind or solar, you're getting charged 16, 12 cents per kilowatt hour, which for my house is somewhere in the $10 to $30 a month, which if you have the extra money, great, so you can make a statement on principle. But I know for a lot of people that's grocery money or whatever, gas money. Recently, though, Arcadia has created a 50% plan that costs you nothing. So just this past about a month ago, right before we started doing these shows 5-6 weeks ago, I switched my power over to Arcadia on a 50% plan. So I'm paying the exact same bill that I would pay to Dominion Power to Arcadia, and 50% of my kilowatt hours are through renewable energy credits. So I feel like I'm not paying anything extra out of pocket, but at the same time, I'm taking money out of Dominion's pocket and putting it toward wind power, renewable energy in the state. So I'm going to put a link to Arcadia Power up on the show notes, and we'll share the information out about them. I encourage everybody to do it. It took about 15-20 minutes maybe. I think it's a great way for everybody to kind of stick it to Dominion. It's one way to really hurt them where it counts. We're going to take a real quick short break. My name is Michael Brandon Way. This is the For Virginia podcast. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. We've got a few minutes left before the end of the show today. I wanted to talk a little bit about the presidential election. I know we try to stay out of it for the most part. Right after the DNC convention about a month ago, Hillary Clinton apparently was up 12 percentage points over Donald Trump in the race. Things have changed a little bit the past 4 or 5 weeks. Apparently most of that lead has evaporated. National polls have kind of come in line. I think in general, though, Trump is losing when you look at the state-by-state electoral map. But on the national polls, it's a little bit tighter, maybe within the margin of error. I told you before, so the Clinton campaign and DNC and Democratic organizations basically had about $2 million in ad buys in the state that they pulled out of. They figured they had it locked so hard that they were going to take this money and go campaign in Arkansas or Texas or South Carolina or some of these traditional red states. Virginia's been very purple, going for Obama past 2 election cycles, even though there's been congressionally speaking, it's red. I think 7 out of 11. So there's been so many people in Virginia. I mean, Hillary picked Kane. We had Trump in Virginia Beach this week on Tuesday. We had Kane in Norfolk on Friday. Apparently Pence was supposed to be in Fauquier, and I know I'm mangling that. Apparently today or sometime this weekend. And then Michelle Obama is supposed to be in Northern Virginia next week. So they might not be spending a lot of money in the state, but they're spending a lot of time. Trump apparently is taking out $2 million ad buy in Virginia as well to kind of get things back from them. And meanwhile, with the Democratic establishment pretty much presuming that Hillary's going to be the president and Kane's going to be vice president, like 30 people have basically approached McAuliffe about being the new senator. Bobby Scott being a perennial favorite. I was at Scott's Labor Day party Monday. First time out there. It was great. Met a lot of friends from the Sanders grassroots, as well as good networking. But basically everybody who's who in Virginia state politics was there, with the exception of the governor, who was slated to appear but did not. Bobby Scott is largely considered the favorite to replace Kane should he be the VP pick. Scott is the senior, I think 40 years now, congressman in Virginia. But some of his weaknesses, apparently he's not a great fundraiser compared to some of the other people who are vying for the seat. And one of the very interesting things is that if Scott is appointed to Kane's seat following this November's election, or whoever is appointed to that seat, they will also have to run for a special election November 2017, and then should they win that, their seat will actually be up in 2018, so they'll have to run again. And so there's going to be a lot of money. Virginia is going to be the only state, potentially the only state in 2017 to have a Senate race. And with the the fact that we have the off-year elections to begin with, the entire House of Delegates being up for grabs, Progressive House VA, check them out. It's going to be a very important year in 2017 for Virginia politics, and that's one of the main reasons why we are doing what we're doing here tonight. Well, that's all the time we've got for this week. We appreciate everyone that tuned in. Thank you for your support and all your shares. Please check out our website, share us on social media, and your financial support is always appreciated. This is the For Virginia Podcast, Episode 6. Please submit your feedback on our website, on Facebook, or by emailing info@forvirginia.org. We'll continue working hard to bring you the news, information, and analysis to help keep the progressive revolution moving forward in Virginia through 2017. My name is Michael Brandon Wade. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.